free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Welcome back to the Your Family Dog podcast. I'm Tina Spring. I'm joined today by my smart and pretty co-host, Julie Fudge Smith. And today we have a wonderful guest on, Brittany Buckley. She is the manager of the histology lab at the University of Georgia Poultry Lab. Is that right, Brittany?
Poultry Research and Diagnostic Center.
Perfect. And today we're going to talk about bird flu or avian influenza A or H5N1 and why it matters to you. So we're so glad you're here, Brittany. And this whole conversation, this whole recording today started with just a side conversation Brittany and I were having yesterday, and I was riveted and learned a bunch of new stuff. So I thought this would be good for everybody. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it, because I keep getting asked about it when people find out where I work. So,
all right. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us. My question, one of my first questions is, I've always been curious about the categorization system, the HN system. This is an H5N1. Could you just explain for us what H and N is and what that categorization means? And is it something that we need to be aware of, or is there a takeaway for us from that?
So the H is just, those are designating the type of proteins that are in this virus that are detected. So the H stands for hemagglutinin. I'm probably gonna butcher these words. The N stands for neuraminidase. And I have a paper that I'm going to link for you guys. So if people want to look up at this information, they can look at all at it, and they could just see the whole history of these viruses and their subtypes. But basically, this is just designating what proteins that they detect with this individual virus. So you have like an H7s, which have a different protein, and H5s are a different subtype with different proteins, and H5N1 that's the first of that subtype.
Right. So there's H5N2, which is a different, I'm assuming, mutation. Would that be a different mutation?
Yes. Basically, these are mutations of the proteins. They have different proteins within them. And what you have to think about viruses kind of as little machines that they can't reproduce on their own. So they want to take over the cells of their hosts to use them to produce more viruses. So they all have different proteins because your cells have natural defenses that prevent things from entering them. So the viruses have these proteins on them that allow them to enter the cell. And depending on the host type, they have a different protein to be able to enter that cell more easily. So what the difference between a high path flu virus versus a low path, you will hear that term, is low path viruses do not pass as easily. The immune system has better defenses against them, versus a high path, which has such unique proteins that the immune systems of the animal hasn't seen before, that they pass more easily.
So that seems to me to be one of the reasons why there are certain flus that can cross species and other flus that can't. It's because of the protein structure of that particular flu, whether or not any given species has a resistance to that particular flu virus.
Yeah,
So,
that's exactly it. The host species of this H5N1 is ducks. That's what people need to understand is that uh, because it has evolved alongside these ducks, that they're not affected by it. So the ducks may not seem sick themselves. They're not going to die off. And so when they migrate, they are passing this virus along. It gets into animals that haven't seen it before, and that's what's causing these die-offs.
Okay, so let's talk. So we're talking all the good sciencey stuff, and we all love that. We like Julie and I can stay in the weeds with that stuff for weeks. But for the average person, why should they care about this avian flu? Why should it matter to all of us?
One, because it has a very high mortality rate in poultry. It's 70 to 100% of birds that haven't that do not have immunity to it are going to die. So it will wipe out your flock if it gets into it. It's usually within 2 to 5 days is when the animals start to have symptoms. So by the time you know it, like these animals die fast. There's not usually much time to treat them. It can linger on surfaces from some studies show up to months, especially in the cold. That's why you see it cropping up more when it gets cold, because this virus is very heat sensitive. So you'll see the prevalence decrease during hotter months, and it will increase in the wintertime when the birds are migrating and it's cold and the virus can survive. So if you have waterfowl, it is also getting into species like vultures and such. If those animals like die on your property, it could be days to weeks to months that that area is contaminated. And for people, so far, this what they're seeing with people who have been infected, I think the latest number is about 67 or 68 people have been infected. One has passed. In other countries where this flu has gotten into people, it kills 40 to 50% of the people it infects. So it can be very severe.
Holy
It's
cow.
just it's the luck of the draw of how bad it is in the person. So far with this strain, there's mostly seeing symptoms. So it's like the people have pink eye. But it can be severe enough. It's mostly attacks your respiratory system. It's basically will cause a person to drown. It causes your respiratory system to break down in a really severe infection. So
That sounds a little bit to me like the 1918 flu. That, there's a lot of lung and fluid buildup in the 1918 flu. So it sounds very similar to me to that one.
yes, that is why we have been watching it for a long time. Since
Yeah,
I've
you
been
mentioned
employed,
it's been around since what, 1959 is when you first noticed this particular strand?
that's when it
correct?
was first detected in chicken flocks in Scotland. It caused a die off there. So about 1996 is when they had a big enough outbreak in China that it got detected again, and we've just been kind of monitoring it. It gets into migrating ducks, and what these ducks do is they migrate across the Arctic Circle. So, of course, it comes over this direction in Canada, Alaska, and whatever. And that is how it has gradually come down from the northern areas, northern states to southern states. And it actually hit Georgia about two years ago, where we started seeing wildlife die-offs. It really hits corvids, which are your ravens, crows, blue jays, and carrion feeders like vultures, because the vultures are very social eaters, so they're more likely to pass it on.
What about your ordinary songbirds, like, your bluebirds, your cardinals, your blue jays, your juncos, those kinds of little birds? Are they as likely to pick up on it, or are they just not using food sources or anywhere near
They
where
can,
the
yes,
population is?
yes. If you have bird feeders, that can pass it. It's just they die so quickly, they don't get to spread it as much as a larger bird.
Oh, okay. What about for our
So
pets? What's the danger for our pets here?
this strain has proven to be very deadly for cats. I don't know if you've seen, or I told Tina about the recall that they've had for a raw cat food company. Can't think of the cat company off of my head, but the AVMA has put out an advisory. But how this how they first detected it in dairy cows, which you've probably been hearing about it in the news, is because all the barn cats were dying. And the
Oh my
cats were
heavens.
drinking raw milk from the cows. It has killed cats that big cats at zoos. It's also it's deadlier towards mustelids like ferrets and mink. It has caused die-offs in mink farms. So if you have something like a ferret, um, you don't want to be giving them like raw food or uh, r- um, raw milk. Um, thus far, we haven't been seeing a lot in dogs, but it is possible for any animal to get this. They've detected it in wild animals like coyotes and foxes and stuff. We know canines can get it. We just don't see severe symptoms. So it could be just the immune systems of these animals are not as affected by this virus. When with just cats, their immune system apparently it either overreacts badly to this infection, or they just can't control the spread very well. Um, but any kind of bird, it's like I said, it's near 100% mortality if they get infected. And for people who have exotic animals, it could cause like the state to come and say you have to kill off these animals. This is what happened to, I don't know if you're aware of Noah's Ark, the sanctuary in Georgia. I'm not even sure if they're still open now, but they had a vulture die off near their property. About 300 vultures died, and they had to kill most of their collection of exotic birds, their parrots, emus, and ostriches, and what have you, their peacocks, because you don't want this type of virus spreading around. And if the birds were infected, they're gonna die anyway. So I tell people, it's not something to panic about, but you need to be aware of it, because these animals will get so sick so fast, you probably will not be able to save them. And as I said, the human mortality is not really something to play around with either.
So my other question is, it's interesting. So you're saying that if I remember correctly, this bird flu seemed to have originated in China. Is that correct?
That is where they believe that the reservoir is basically the duck population. That's
Right.
the species that has evolved alongside this virus, because viruses, it's not good to kill off your host if you're a virus.
Right.
You can't reproduce anymore. So with ducks, even though they're infected, it doesn't kill them. It doesn't really make them very sick. So they just carry it around. So the main reservoir appears to be these populations of ducks within China and Russia. but it's been around a long time, and that's why
Right.
it's still around, because it doesn't make those animals sick. Because these migration patterns have changed for a lot of these bird populations, there's been more development in China and Russia that removes their habitat. They're moving around more. That's why this virus becomes a problem, because it's getting into populations that haven't encountered it before, and the immune system doesn't know what to do with it.
So for the average pet owner, dog or cat owner, if I'm hearing you correctly, concerns are if you have your own yard birds, that's, or ducks or geese or guineas or whatever. Like here in the South, lots of people have guineas to control pests on their property because they eat fleas and ticks and all the things. So, so the risk is to your own fowl if you have them. Secondarily, potentially driving up pricing, because if whole chicken houses have to be destroyed and culled, then that's potentially going to drive up prices of meat birds. I'm assuming this could impact egg birds too, right? Because especially like free range birds that are being impacted more by migrating birds flying over, right?
Yes, that's already happened. It it's either Idaho or Iowa, but it's already happened, where it has gotten into layer farms, because egg producers basically have the birds in layer farms, where it's just thousands of birds in close proximity. They're not, they're usually in pens indoors, or whatever. And then you have the pasture type that are letting the birds have outside. Even if it says cage free, layers are cage free anyway, usually, if they have access to the outside. The problem is it's very hard to decontaminate your whole building, your whole facility, make sure everyone's following biosecurity, putting on clean suits in and out, and whatever. So it has already impacted egg prices, because the layer population, they've had to kill off birds when they're infected. It's affecting broilers, which are the meat birds, because they get, there's been several houses that had to be killed off. And already, with what happened with the COVID pandemic, where they had to close down the slaughterhouses, there's already a backlog, because what happened when they closed the slaughterhouses, the birds grow so fast that if you close a slaughterhouse, they will get too big for the machinery to wait to slaughter them. So they had to kill everything and start over anyway. So there's already a backlog in the broiler production. So you're definitely going to see chicken prices rise as this goes forward. It's not a good time to bring in new birds to your flock. I would advise against going into a kind of chicken shows or whatever, a kind of where they're selling birds, like flea markets, and they do that sometimes. You just don't know if those animals have been exposed to ducks or geese. And because there is a couple days where they won't show any symptoms, it's risky. And if you have birds at home as pets, or in your flock yard, you don't want to be kissing all over them or whatever. Just for your safety.
Fewer cuddles.
Yeah.
Stop cuddling that chicken.
you want to wear personal protective equipment when you're slaughtering chickens. If you kill your own birds, because um, this is how people have been infected generally, is that
Well,
they are
that what
either
was I
they
was going to ask you, because when the little bit of research I did, last night in preparation, said it's not foodborne. So if you ate a bird who had been impacted, it's not going to pass it on to you. So that's what I kept wondering, is how all these people are getting infected. It turns out it's everyone kissing ducks on the lips.
um, well, it's more on the virus is in their feces, and in their
Oh, well,
nasal
that's a
secretions,
totally different story.
and that their respiratory system. So it's generally on the outside of birds. If you've ever seen ducks, they are kind of dirty animals. Um, I lived near ducks, and it was a mess. They poop all in the water. Their feathers get everywhere, and it's more on the outside of the animal. So when you're killing the animal, that is a high chance of getting contaminated. So you want to wear a mask or whatever, just because the birds um feces and stuff, it's going to be on the animal.
So my question for you is, what about like Canadian geese populations? Are they showing signs of bird flu? Because it seems to me that at least where our cottage is, we have a certain number of resident geese, but we also have transitory geese. We have geese that come through. I'm in Ohio, from north moving south. Some of them migrate here during the summer or during the winter, and then they leave. So we've got these influx of birds coming in and out of Canada and from the south and from the north. Are Canadian geese a significant purveyor of this virus?
I would because they have found this virus in pelicans. They found it in all kinds of waterfowl. It's basically any kind of bird that gathers in large social groupings is really at risk. Right now, there's a snow geese die-off that's in the news. It's in Pennsylvania, where hundreds of birds are dying, and they're having to cull whatever is left just to try and stop it. So I haven't seen much with the Canadian geese, and it's possible that, like ducks, they've encountered this virus enough that their immune system is it copes with it. So they're not dying, but they could still be infected. So
then you get to be careful of when ducks are on your lawn and they're defecating on your lawn. It's the feces that you need to be careful of then.
yes. So you want to keep your animals away from migrating animals. If you have to scare them off, it's just you can't really tell, because these ducks, they don't get sick. And by the time you find dead animals on your property, then your animals are probably going to be infected.
Right. So I don't have cats. I have dogs. So keeping my dogs away from one of them loves to chase the geese across the lake. So we tried to prevent that because she gets exhausted. So keeping them away from goose feces. If your dog or your cat should be exposed, unfortunately, to these feces, what are some of the things that you need to be looking for that might indicate that your animal needs some help?
Well, it's a respiratory virus mostly. So it would be labored breathing, it'd be nasal discharge, it'd be lethargy, running a fever. There's there's several viruses that are going around. There's a canine flu. There's it's just probably more noticeable in cats now because they're less likely to be exposed. With dogs, we take them out places. We go to dog shows and things like that, and that's generally how they encounter these viruses. But usually animals, they will go off their food. And there's testing, so veterinarians can test for this now. And I would definitely, if you see any symptoms like that, I definitely bring that up to your veterinarian. Tell you want to see if you test for it.
Are there
But there's
treatments for
been
this at all, or is this just? I mean, there's no viruses. Like you can't take an antibiotic for a virus, right? Do antivirals work against this, or are we just talking about supportive care?
I've from what I've seen with the cats is they're doing supportive care. Um, I'm assuming there would probably be um antivirals available. It kind of depends on what your veterinarian has access to. Um, I'm not sure at the moment if there's an antiviral that veterinarians are using.
So in the case of um, raw foods for animals, should people consider switching off of poultry, or should they not really worry about that? And my other question is, does cold pasteurization and freeze drying destroy the virus as well? Although it sounds like there's not a risk if they ingest it.
Well, these cats, the ones that have died from this recall, um, let me. I just had it open and I accidentally closed it. But
That
I
happens to
believe
all of
they're,
us.
y- um, I believe that this particular food they don't use the pasteurization. There's another type I know that they use to try and somewhat sterilize it.
So they could
I mean
like
the
irradiate
problem,
the food potentially, like UV,
yeah.
or like there's other ways. So, but the research, and again, you're the expert. I'm not the expert. I just, Googled. So, it looks like the risk as far as from ingesting infected meat is not very high. So, what do we think is happening in cats that that's not the case, that suddenly it is being passed on to those animals through what they ingest?
Um, it really depends on the species because with cats, they've always kind of been more susceptible to this flu. From what I'm reading, it looks like this company, like this is just a minimally processed food, so it is completely raw, and it's also raw milk that the cats are dying from. So they're definitely getting it from ingesting it. Um, it so far it doesn't seem to be as much of a problem in dogs. So it may be something with cats' digestion that they're just um not breaking down the live flu virus that is still in this raw milk or this raw meat. What I'm seeing is it's saying that this isn't turkey. So this isn't even chicken. This they've detected it in turkey-based raw cat food. Um, so this is from what I know about raw food. I don't feed it to my animals, but they're pretty much grinding up this meat. Um, if you grind up an animal and you have organs and stuff in there, the flu virus is in their intestines um, of the animal. So that's kind of the risk you're running when you have that raw meat. If it's whole organ meat, it's definitely in the intestines. It could be in other body parts of the animal. It's not really on the outside of the animal. So if you're just mainly feeding muscle meat, then it's probably not as much of a risk. If you're feeding a ground up animal, that's where it's riskier. And then you have milk. Um, how it was first detected, and the cows themselves are getting sick. They declared it a emergency in California because over 60% of their herds are they have detected it in their cow herds, and they have ICUs set up for these cows because some of them are getting sick. So I would
So once the
say
milk is pasteurized, though, the pasteurization process, it seems to me, would kill the virus. Is that correct?
yes, they find parts of virus, but it's broken down, and so far it doesn't seem like that's a risk. So the pasteurization definitely breaks down the virus. Over at the USDA is across the street from us, and they've been looking at this for a while. So they are detecting it in the pasteurized product, but it's not live virus. Um, so if you're gonna use milk pasteurized, or like, I'm not going to tell anybody to not drink and use raw milk, but you better know who you're getting it from, that they are keeping their cows away from birds. Um, their property's not contaminated, and that they're going to let people know if they have an issue.
Well, my first thought was poor California. First fires, now contaminated cows. It's been a rough time for that particular state. So I guess my question for you is that, there's been, in the past, we've had scares. I remember in 1976, it was the swine flu that we were all supposed to be so terribly scared of, and it turned out to sort of not be much of a scare at all. And I think that there's a certain level of distrust that the public has towards government pronouncements of problems. So how would you, I guess, assure people that what we're talking about here is something that should be paid attention to, that this is not the boogeyman. This is genuine information that's coming out that is pertinent to the general public. How do you reassure people that the government really does know what it's talking about here?
So the issue with this, and how it has really gotten out of hand, and I'm just going to say this, that we don't really know how bad the spread is, because what has happened is the agriculture industry has become very, very skeptical. They don't want this government interference. So when this first started to happen, where these animals got sick, they and then their workers get sick, they're not required to report. It's voluntary reporting. And nobody wants to be shut down with sick animals. So all the information we are getting is delayed. It's after it's gotten so bad that they have to report it. So officials are they're making their best guess, and people, they do need to be coming out and saying that this is their best guess, because since this is voluntary reporting, we can't really track it. What happened with swine flu, when we were aware that people were sick, we did really good contact tracing. I believe people have become aware of what that word means since COVID. It's basically tracing a disease back to the origin so that you can quarantine everyone involved in it. And that is how we stopped swine flu. I don't know if anybody remembers the original SARS that came over. That was also from China. They detected in some people on flights, and contact tracing stopped that. MERS, which is the Middle Eastern version of this, similar thing to the coronavirus, respiratory virus, was another thing. So this isn't a new thing for us to have potential pandemic viruses. What has really happened is the system of communication and trust has broken down. And people need to not panic, but you need to be aware, because this is going to cost you money if you buy chicken or poultry. And most dog food is poultry based. Like I had a chicken allergic dog, and it is extremely hard to find a food that does not have at least poultry fat and egg in it. So dog food prices are going to go up, because as these flocks are wiped out, the industry has to compete with human food producers, with chicken producers, for the meat and chicken, or they have to import it. So, and nobody really wants to be feeding their dog and cat chicken from China if we can help it. So it is important to be aware of that's why these things are happening, and to also protect yourself, because if people get really sick with this, the main people who are going to get sick are the same people who got sick with COVID. It's the people who have to interact with the public routinely, like service workers or whatever, and it will be the people in the hospitals. And it will cause emergency rooms to fill up. It will cause labor shortages. And so it will be harder for you to get care. And it will cause people to be out of work, of course. So at the moment, we are hoping that it doesn't spread but between people, and it stays like this mild. They've only, so far what I've seen, they've only had the one death. But they have had at least one case in Canada where it was not someone who'd been recently in contact with birds or dairy. They're not sure where this person got it. So that speaks to the possibility that it could be transferring person to person. And that is the biggest concern, is that this virus becomes easily transmissible between people. And also what they're really worried about is swine, as pigs, because pigs are very similar to people. They get the same viruses. And when those viruses meet up in the same animal, they exchange genetic information. So you could get, like, if you got a cold virus that's human transmissible in a pig, and at the same time that pig got bird flu, those viruses could interchange genetic information, and you could get a highly transmissible bird flu. And that is what we are most afraid of.
That reminds me once again of the 1918 flu. You know, the flu originally originated in the United States in 1917, and then was taken by our soldiers over to France, where there was another flu. And the reason it was called the Spanish flu was because Spain wasn't involved in World War I. It was the only country that was giving out population statistics based on what was happening with the flu. Well, these two flus met up, and then all these soldiers at the end of the war come back to the United States, and they bring a much more potent flu back with them because it had genetic exchange with the European flu, and that's what caused the really deadly 1918 flu. So this is not an uncommon pattern you're describing. This happens a lot, and you're absolutely right. No matter what the parasite or whatever may be, it doesn't pay to kill your host. It pays to become more contagious. And I think we've seen that with COVID. COVID perhaps has become a little bit, with all the variations of it, it seems to become, somewhat easier to pass on, but it will reduce some of its potency because it makes sense to make somebody sick and be able to distribute myself, but I don't want to kill my host because otherwise I've got it's a dead end for me as well. So I think that this is a all too common pattern that most people don't have a real appreciation for the severity of this, and why, being careful about the way in which you handle things makes a difference, because not only can you stop the spread amongst your family, but it helps to prevent the spread to other things as well, or the interaction with another virus. So, Yeah, you described something that has a potential to become very, very scary if when it's not monitored or dealt with correctly. So you've given us a lot of really good information here. Tina, you got any questions here?
I just found the whole conversation with Brittany yesterday really, really instructive. So, to recap, so this was first found in 1959, yes?
Yes, yes. So it is not a new thing. This particular subclass of flu has been around a long time. Um,
And it
and
was
it
not
is
created, and it was not created in the poultry lab at UGA. I had someone tell me that yesterday.
no, we
Boy,
are
that's
not
a
creating
relief. I was
viruses.
really concerned about that one.
We are not. We don't have the money to do that. Um, we- we're struggling with having air conditioning and heat right now, so nobody's creating anything. We have always, for a long time, run studies on this virus to help develop a vaccine uh, for uh, for the poultry industry. So there is a vaccination for the birds. Um, like it's either in development. I don't know if they put it out yet. So optimistically, the industry will choose to vaccinate their birds. That's been the biggest issue, is getting the industry to vaccinate, because like in Europe, chickens are vaccinated against salmonella. So they don't have outbreaks like we do. We have a vaccine. The industry just doesn't want to do it.
And I'm assuming that this is also something that's rife for research on like phages, where we can give the virus a bacteria that makes the virus sick, so that then it's a different mechanism to try to manage the disease as well.
Um, I haven't seen much about using phages to fight. Kind of the thing with treating this virus is you you got to get people to spend the money to do it. That's kind of the obstacle. And with the poultry industry, because individual birds are so cheap, they kind of rather just start
Right.
over.
But it's expensive to cull a whole house, or to have,
Hmm.
or goodness sakes, a whole farm, and then to
Yes.
be down during contamination. So, I mean, it's costing them money either direction. So it's whether it's on the prevention side or whether it's on the having to deal with it once it's occurred side.
My question is, how do you vaccinate a bird? Can you do it through like an oral vaccination where you put the medication in their feed, or do all these birds have to be individually injected?
Uh,
How do you vaccinate a bird?
they can vaccinate the eggs. You you could you could basically vaccinate them when they're in the egg. You can do nasal. You can do it in the feed. So there's several different ways to vaccinate them. Um, Birds are generally vaccinated against several diseases, like Merrick's is one. It causes tumors. It's a virus. Um, and one one thing with that, though, is that sometimes the vaccines themselves can cause um, tumors and reactions depending on how the birds react to them. Um,
Well, can you use
there,
like a cross species vaccination? It sounds interesting to me. So if you say you've got a chicken and a turkey farm, can you use the same vaccine on chickens and turkeys, or does it have to be modified according to the species?
it has to be modified according to the species. You got to be, because these are food animals and people are going to eat them. You got to go through the FDA and everything to make sure that it's approved for that species. So you've got to run experiments and trials and whatever to make sure that this is safe for the birds. So it takes a long time when you do develop a vaccination for it to actually become marketable. If it's just for animals, if it's for people, then
That's
now
a whole
they're
nother, that's a whole nother ballgame.
yeah.
I don't think what people understand is that these vaccines, the development of these vaccines is a very lengthy and expensive process. This is not something that normally can be done basically overnight. Because you do have to do it according to species. You do have to make sure that it actually works against a particular virus. And it's also not just a particular species of animals that's going to be vaccinated, but it's also a very particular general, like the vaccine for this particular flu may not work towards, the H5N3 because it might not have the same sort of reason. So these things are difficult. If you have to keep developing vaccines for all the different flus, you're talking about an expensive and lengthy process.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so the
yes, it
takeaways
is.
are we should be aware. We shouldn't be panicked, but we should understand that this is something we should be paying attention to and kind of having plans in place in case something odd happens, right? In case all of a
Yes.
sudden we're seeing lots of recalls on chicken or something like that. Where can people get reputable information? Because part of, I think, the disconnect between like your histology lab and the average person is that then the media gets involved and burps up all sorts of crazy information that's not accurate. And then people start to doubt the science when really it's the media we're doubting.
Yes, the media tends to oversimplify and they tend not to put everything in context. So it will seem like the information comes out of nowhere when it's something that people on the ground and facilities like where I work have been seeing this for a long time, working on this for a long time. The AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, has been putting out alerts about this recall. They have a Facebook page, so that's how I've been seeing it. That are specific, and veterinarians really don't have any reason to be unclear about this. The NIH, the National Institutes of Health, has a lot of information like that. It's the technical information, but I think nowadays that may be more helpful than just the news blurbs, because news nowadays is generated to try and get attention. It's not necessarily passed on information, is they want your eyeballs on it. So they're going to say the most sensational thing or whatever and not take the time to really go into depth on it. I can share links to the papers and everything that I kind of reviewed. And just to let you know, there is as of May of last year, there is a vaccine that there is approved in Europe. So we'll see if that vaccine makes it over here to be used by the poultry industry. But that is likely what is going to happen is they're going to vaccinate the birds because it's just going to cost them a lot of money continuously. But what I'd say to people is when you hear about like Governor Kemp has declared this basically shutdown of poultry activities and whatever. They're doing this because it is serious. It is going to cost. Poultry is the biggest industry in Georgia. It's billions of dollars. So it's costing the state a lot of money. And even if you don't want to believe that it's serious, it's going to hit your wallet, whether you believe it or not. And And
here in
just,
Ohio, we are huge egg producers, especially in Delaware and Licking County, where I'm located. We have hundreds of thousands of layers, and I was told by a reputable source that we produce all the eggs for the East Coast. So, it's a huge industry. It has a huge impact on a variety of people. And, and the last thing any of us needs is yet another hit to our wallet after we've had inflation for, several years. The last thing I want to see is the price of eggs go up yet again, and the price of milk, because if it's starting to affect cows, and you're going to see the price of milk and butter just continue to rise. And these staples
and
are important to keep,
yeah,
within
and
prices.
eggs are used in a lot of things. You think eggs are used in breads, any bread product that you get. Eggs are used in the manufacturing of viruses. That's like they grow viruses not viruses in vaccines. So they grow vaccines in eggs. That is, even if you get your dog a vaccine, some of those vaccines are grown in eggs. So the egg supply is very important. It's not just the chickens the protein in eggs is used in a lot of products you wouldn't even think contain eggs. So it's going to continue to affect us all, even if it doesn't infect a lot of people health wise. And of course, if you have a pet bird or a pet cat, it um, could cost that animal its life if they get infected, because veterinarians do not really have experience treating this. Most of them are going to go for something supportive, and you have to kind of hope that they live. I just saw a guy is suing because 3 of his cats died. He's suing a producer of raw milk because 3 of his cats died at a veterinary clinic. So it's going to cost these industries too if people sue because their animals pass away.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Brittany, for joining us today and giving us some really valuable, and I know for Tina and I, being the science kind of geeks that we are, that this was really interesting, and we really appreciate it. And it never hurts to raise awareness about things that are on the horizon, because you can't do anything about it if you're not informed. So thanks again so much for sharing your information with us. And I hope you'll come back and maybe bring us some better news next time.
Right? I'm like, oh, good, more stuff to worry about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's unfortunately the process of life. Like these viruses, like they've always existed. It's
right.
An old life form. It's as old as we are. It's older than we are. And
it's not an emergency, at least not right now. It's aware.
Not an emergency yet. It is an emergency for the poultry industry,
of course,
right now, because they don't really have a cap on it, and that's what they're doing here in Georgia by trying to shut down the poultry events and travel with birds. Is they're trying to get a cap on it. It is not a emergency for people yet, but people need to watch it. They need to be aware of what they're feeding their animals. That is from a trusted facility that will tell them if something is wrong, because you just have to remember that reporting is voluntary. The government cannot make these companies shut down. They have to say, hey, we're having problems. And resources for tracking this are stretched. So it's kind of up to you to be informed enough so that you know what's going on.
Well, and
I hate to
honestly,
say, yeah.
I think a lot of the growers are owned by China. right? Like they're big investors
Well,
in
that's
the
the
US.
case
And
in pigs, in pork.
they're
Yes.
not really all that excited about complying necessarily with what the US government wants.
Yeah, you do have to be aware of that. It's in an ideal world, you shop local, you go to like a local producer or whatever, buy meat from them, and they follow up on that supply chain so that they know that they're not contaminated and everything is safe. I personally would not be feeding raw poultry to my animals right now. I had some chicken hearts already frozen, and I cooked them in my oven because sometimes I just use them as a treat, right, for my dogs. And so I went ahead and cooked them just in case, because we just don't have all the information. If your animal gets sick, the veterinarians don't really have experience with this. Um, so to me, it's better safe than sorry.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
being aware helps me navigate. Because honestly, every time I turn around and there's I get the AVMA email every morning, and I haven't really paid much attention to the H5N1 stuff. I'm like, that's about birds. I don't have yard birds. But you did definitely yesterday ring my bell of like, oh no, this is something I need to pay attention to.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully you'll be able to come back in not a too terribly long a time and tell us that there's a wonderful new vaccine now available for our bird population. And
well, yeah, thank you for letting me, like, I like trying to explain this because I understand that people don't have time in the day to gather all this information, because I work for a facility where we have a researcher and for a pathologist who gets called out when these birds are sick, or like I'm just always aware of it because of my job, but I like having the opportunity to tell people to try and so that they don't panic, but they're aware, because you don't want to get caught off guard with it, because it'd be I'm sure for that guy who right now who's suing over his cats, that's devastating to think you had something safe and to accidentally kill your animals that way. And that's not something people should go through. Most people operate with the assumption that the food that they purchase is safe. And so if you're feeding raw, you just need to be aware. And if you see dead birds in your area around, report it. Report it to the Department of Agriculture, or think the CDC may have a number too, but definitely the Department of Agriculture. You see, even if it's songbirds or whatever, it could be that there is bird flu in your area, and they will definitely want to know. And it gives us a better idea of how far this has spread. Hopefully, over the summer when it gets hot again, we'll see the instance die down. That's what the industry is hoping for. But yeah, right now, while it's cold, while birds are migrating around, it's higher risk.
okay. All right. Well, thanks again. And we will see you all next time on Your Family Dog.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.